I want God to be the only influence that reigns supreme in my life. And as long as any desire for anything is reigning in my life, I am not controlled by God, and I am a sensual person. Sensual wanderer, listen up. It's not too late. It's not too late for sensual wanderers to come home. Why don't you take your Bibles and turn, please, to Judges 16. Can you find it? Judges 16. While you're turning there, let me just remind you that we're in a series about calling the wanderer home. We're in a series about go get the wanderer and bring them home. It's all flowing out of James 5:19. My brothers, if anyone among you wanders from the truth, and someone brings him back, let him know that whoever brings back a sinner from his wandering will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins. Let's start with a good definition of the word sensual, because I don't want you to be confused. When I say sensual, that's a word that includes, but is not limited to, sexual activity. Okay, that's a misunderstanding of the word. Sensual is more than just sexual. The word actually means pertaining to, inclined to, or preoccupied with the gratification of my body. That's what sensual means. Again, it means pertaining to, inclined to, or preoccupied with the gratification of my body. Actually, the phrase comes to us from the 1400s, this word from a Latin word, sensualis, which means of the senses. The pursuit of that which pleases my senses. A sensual person, then, is one who is consumed with indulging their own desires. All right? And I want to be so clear that we understand that I mean sexual, but not just that I'm going to go through here just quickly before we get into Judges. I'm going to go through some areas where people struggle not to be conquered by desire. Let's start with one common to so many of us, food. Food is a desire that is not wrong in itself, but it can become wrong. From 1971 to 2004, the average daily calorie intake of an American went up 22%, up by more than a fifth just during our lifetime. Entertainment. The average person watches 142 hours of television per month. That's like my other job. My job and then my other job. It's almost a full-time thing. 1 in 7 people have an internet addiction, spending 30 or more hours per week on non-essential internet use, including games, shopping, gambling, illicit sites, so entertainment. What Neil Postman said, we're amusing ourselves to death. Food, entertainment. Okay, legal substances that people are consumed with desire for. Legal substances, let's start with something common, coffee. 400 billion cups of coffee are consumed every year, making caffeine the most commonly taken mind-altering drug on the planet. A Starbucks Grande, 550 milligrams of caffeine, is enough to cause heightened stress and insomnia. You know, just drug it up there, baby. You're like, do they know that they're making us addicted? No, they have no idea. Now to a more serious legal substance, alcohol. Alcohol. Absolutely tearing and shredding the fabric of our society. There isn't a social evil that is not significantly amplified by alcohol. Drill down on anyone you want, from incest to spousal abuse to murder. The highest percentage of, why would someone do that? Here's why. Alcohol. Alcohol taking everything that's wrong in our hearts and turning the volume up on all of it. Legal substance. But of course, a person can have a consuming desire for something even when it's destroying them and those around them. Food, entertainment, legal substances, illegal substances. An estimated 20.4 million people in the United States used illegal drugs in 2006. That seems low to me. Marijuana was the most common drug. Painkillers were second. Cocaine was third. A lot of talk these days about how drug use among high school students is going down slightly. But interesting, it increased by 50% among people over 50 years of age during the last 4 years. I think that's a student problem, drugs, isn't it? No. People over 50, up in the usage of illegal drugs to numb the pain of life. And God doesn't want you to numb it. God wants you to deal with it. And then, of course, immorality. Sexual sin, sex a good thing outside the lines that God has prescribed, a bad thing, really a very destructive thing. By the age of 19, 3/4 of men and women have had intercourse, and more than 2/3 have had 2 or more partners. Deviance is being defined down in our society. Less and less do people consider anything abnormal or perverse. An increasing number of Americans believe that cohabitation, adultery, homosexuality, pornography are morally acceptable behaviors. Sensuality in our culture, it's out of control. Now, obviously, some of the things I just mentioned are more serious than others. The scripture says, I will not be brought under the power of anything. I want God to be the only influence that reigns supreme in my life. And as long as any desire for anything is reigning in my life, I am not controlled by God, and I am a sensual person. All right? So into the life of Samson, Judges 14. Samson was a sensual person. Actually, if you look in chapter 13, you can see that Samson was born to barren parents. They were told that they could never have children. They were told that. You'll never. And then all of a sudden, an angel appeared and announced to Samson's parents, you're going to have a boy, and he's going to be special, and he's going to belong to me from the day that he was born. So Samson's parents were fired up. Actually, he was to become a Nazarite. Do you know what a Nazarite is? You're like, actually, I've been thinking about becoming one of those. Don't, okay? That's like an Old Testament thing, okay? In the Old Testament, a Nazarite was a person who took a vow that they were going to belong totally to God. We're supposed to have all taken that vow. That's what the Lordship of Jesus Christ is all about. But in the Old Testament, they did some specific things in order to indicate the fact that they belonged to God. A Nazarite vow meant that a person, first of all, would abstain from wine and from strong drink. Always interesting to me that whether it be a priest or a Nazarite, people who belonged totally to God stayed away from alcohol. That was the commitment of the Nazarite. Secondly, they were never allowed to touch a dead corpse, not a person, not an animal, never allowed to touch anything dead. Huge part of the Nazarite vow. And then they were not allowed to cut their hair for the duration of the vow. So in Samson's case, it was for a lifetime. And so he was not going to have his hair cut for his entire lifetime. These were things to remind him when he walked by a barber shop. He was like, no, I belong to God. And when someone would offer him a drink, he'd be like, no, I belong to God. Okay? He was to be reminded all the time, these little practical things, my life belongs totally to God. Sadly, though, pathetically, though, Samson's life did not belong to God. It belonged to Samson. He was a sensual person. Now I'm ready to get into it. Judges 14:1. Are you a sensual person? Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Okay, last part of the setup. Look up here for another second. Philistines. Do you get it? Arch enemies. Sort of like saying to an American, Al-Qaeda. Okay? The Philistines were the arch enemies of the nation of Israel. Actually, they were descendants of Ham, and they were refugee, nomadic people. They never had a land of their own, never. And I thought this was also interesting. The Hebrew for a Philistine is Pel-Ishtim. The Greek is Palestinoi, from which we get our word Palestine, Palestinian, okay? These are the people that under Joshua, they were to come up and drive them out of the land. Here's a little side note. Incomplete obedience equals ongoing problem. The Philistines weren't supposed to be around. God gave Joshua the authority and the armies to drive them out. But they thought, well, we got enough space here. Everything's good. Just start setting up tents and let's have a party. When they should have finished the job, but because they didn't finish the job, incomplete obedience, ongoing problem. And so the Philistines were an enemy, a nuisance, a bother. Other things happened down the road. even after Samson's time. Samson was raised up by God to drive the Philistines out. God gave him special strength, but instead of using his special strength to do the job God gave him, he used his special strength to satisfy his sensual self. That's why later we hear about the problem with Goliath. That's why later we hear under the kings about the ark being stolen. That was all the Philistines. It's still going on today. Incomplete obedience, ongoing problem. All right, so Samson, sensual guy, goes to Timnah, verse 1, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines, verse 2. Then he came up and told his father and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now, here saw doesn't mean he observed. It doesn't mean, oh, I saw this girl. He saw her. He saw her. Everybody with me on that? I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. Notice this, first of all, sensual wanderers have no respect. They have no respect. Who talks to their parents like that? Get her for me. Sad. Notice that Samson's choice was not based on her beliefs, not based on her character. He wasn't like, wow, Mom and Dad, this girl, her GPA. Mom and Dad, this girl, she wants to be a doctor. She's awesome. She looked, wanted, demanded, no respect. All because he saw. His father and his mother said to him, is there not a woman? Listen to his father pleading gently. Is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives or among our own people that you must go take from the uncircumcised Philistines? They're pagans. But Samson said to his father, get her for me. She's right in my eyes. Who does that? Of course, the parents' objection is so weak. They're putting their relationship ahead of what's right. Samson had no respect for his calling. He wants what's forbidden and nothing will stop him. Samson had no respect for his parents, for their feelings, for their objections. They're in the way and they're callously cast aside so the sensual person can get what they want. And so sensual wanderers have no respect. So Samson goes down and he's going to get this woman. Notice in verse 8, after some days he returned. Notice in the text, Judges 14:8. After some days he returned to take her. You see that in the text? Notice, not to woo her, not to win her, not to take her on a few dates and let her see what a cool guy he was, okay? Not to ask her or to invite her. Listen up. For the sensual wanderer, people are always things, okay? For the sensual person, all right, for the person who lives for desire, people are props in my soliloquy, all right? People are options on my car as I race down the carefree highway. That's the way sensual people think about others. Others is a channel that the sensual wanderer never tunes into. It's always me, all the time, what I want. So further in 14:8, after some days he returned to take her. Wow. And he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. What's a Nazarite supposed to think when he sees a carcass? Everyone? Touch or don't touch? I'm listening. Touch or don't touch? Don't touch. And he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion and honey. I want it. He scraped it out with his hands and went on eating as he went. And he came to his father and mother, ceremonially defiling them too. He gave some to them, and they ate. But he did not tell them, of course, that he had scraped the honey from the carcass, something they would have liked to have known because they weren't as sensual like he was. They're like, no, we're not going to. No. So he didn't tell them, and he defiled them too. Samson thinks he's above the law. Samson thinks there is no law other than what I want. That's the motto of the sensual wanderer. I do what I want. When you see this person, if you're trying to figure it out, They just do what they want. They're controlled by appetite. Should I eat this cake? I do what I want. Should I drink this six-pack? Do what you want. Should I watch this video? Should I go to this place? Should I entertain this relationship that I know is out of bounds? This will help me decide. I do what I want. And you're headed straight for the cliff. You really are. You're controlled by your appetite. Sensual wanderers have no respect. They're controlled by appetite. Jot this down thirdly. Sensual wanderers are oblivious to the carnage. Oblivious to the carnage. If you have ever felt the pain of loving a sensual wanderer, you have probably asked yourself the question, don't they see the damage they're doing? And the answer is, no, they do not. Blind to anything else other than my own needs and desires. Well, starting in about verse 10, they start the wedding feast. His father went down to the woman, and Samson prepared a feast there, for so the young men used to do. During this time, Samson gets a little bored. He gathers his friends around. He says, hey, guys, let's have a little wager. And he makes a riddle about what happened with the lion and the honey. Verse 14. And he said to them, out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. And he challenged them and he said, if you can tell me the answer to that riddle, what am I talking about, what happened, by the end of the marriage feast, I'll give you 30 pieces, 30 garments of linen, and 30 changes of clothing. But if you can't, you've got to give it to me. So they're like, we'll do it. But on the fourth day, verse 15, they said to Samson's wife, entice your husband. Again, there's a lot in that word. It does not mean offer him a Ritz cracker. Entice your husband to tell us what the riddle is, lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. So here's the problem with marrying someone who has a loyalty to something else. And what she should have said was, step away. This is my man now. I'm with him. But because it was an interfaith marriage, she had hugely divided loyalties. And she was like, go with Samson, or my father, my house, my family get burned. I'm with you guys. So she says, I'll do it. And Samson's wife wept over him and said, you only hate me. You do not love me. You have put a riddle to my people and have not told me what it is. And blah, wah, and all that. She wept before him the 7 days that their feast lasted. On the seventh day, he told her because she pressed him hard. Again, with me? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. She pressed him hard. Then she told the riddle to her people, and the people of the city said to him on the seventh day, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? And he said, if you had not plowed with, what a statement, if you had not plowed with my heifer. Did he just call his wife a cow? Did he? Did anyone hear that? He's not a super respectful guy. Anyway, so what he should do at this point is okay, I've learned some lessons here. Down with interfaith marriage, down with fits of anger, down with touching and breaking my vows, down with making silly wagers with people that are going to cost me a lot. But did he learn his lesson? Answer me, did he learn? No, he did not. So instead, he goes into a fit of rage and goes down to some village and personally kills 30 people, strips the clothes off them, brings them back up, throws them in front of the guys. He's like, what's up now? And he's so angry over what's happened, but sadly he doesn't learn anything. Oblivious to the carnage. Sensual wandering ruins reason. Now follow the text as it continues. Samson flies off the handle again, goes out and kills 1,000 men. Then he's thirsty and he demands water from God. He's out of control, so much so that chapter 16, verse 1 begins this way. Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw and went, wanted and took, felt and got. He saw a prostitute, and he went into her. And now the text is hardly even commenting about it. It's so commonplace. This is what the sensual wanderer is like. First every month, then every week, then every day, then every moment. Note this fourthly, sensual wanderers are getting worse and growing weaker. If you had said to Samson, hey, what are you doing this for? What are you going into a prostitute for? He's like, I have needs. I have needs. But Samson, what about God's call? I have needs. What about your health? What about your future? I have needs. If this was a play, it would begin with dramatic music. After this, he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek. That valley was a disputed territory. It may have been Hebrew. It may have been Philistine. He loved a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, seduce him and see, because, the word was on the street, right? The guy's like a sensual weakling. Offer him something that'll please him. Give him a lifesaver. He'll be your pet. Okay? He's weak. And the Lord of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, seduce him and see where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to humble him, and we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. So she must have been an Israelite, because if she was a Philistine, they wouldn't have had to pay her. And so, but they're paying her a lot now. Each of these leaders, we don't know how many were, are going to give her 1,100 pieces of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, and now starts, look up here, now starts this little cat and mouse game. What's the secret of your strength, Samson? Tease, tease, tease. Enough said. He's like, I don't want to tell you, but I sort of want what you have. She's like, I want what you have. You want what I have? I want what you have. You tell me what I want to know, I'll give you what you want. Starts a little cat and mouse game. She's pulling him in. And so first of all, in verse 7, she says, it's fresh bowstrings, what would have been used in a bow and arrow. Okay, but help me out. So he goes to sleep or whatever, and she ties him up with the bowstrings, and then she's like, the Philistines are on you. And he jumps up and breaks them. Now, if a woman asks you the secret of your great strength, that's a weird question. But if you tell her not the truth, and then she tries to tie you up, this is getting weird, and she tries to tie you up, and then she pronounces that your arch enemies are rushing upon you, would you just be like, I forget you? Would you be like, yeah, not me and you, no more? You're weird. You think you'd be able to, but look at the sensual, blind to the danger. He wants what he wants. He can only see what he wants. And so we're all like, duh. And it doesn't just happen one time. Because when she finds out it's not that verse 10 and 11, it's new ropes. And he gets up and breaks those like a thread. And then now he starts, she's tease. So now she starts to get to him. And he's like, it's a hair thing. He's almost on it, But I'm not allowed to weave my hair. That's my strength. You can't weave it and pin it down to my head, or I'm a weakling like other men. And she made them tight with the pin and said to him, the Philistines are on you. He woke from his sleep, pulled away the pin. She said to him, how can you say I love you? Manipulate. When your heart is not with me, you've mocked me 3 times. You haven't told me where your great strength lies. And when she pressed him, get it? Hard with her words day after day, and pestered is what it means. His soul was vexed, means annoyed, tired, really literally cut short. And he told her all his heart. A razor has never come upon my head. I've been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If my head is shaved, my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any. You're actually weak already, Samson, more weak than you know. When Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she could tell. Wow, he really told me. She calls the Philistines, come up again. He told me his heart. They come up, give her the money, and she made him sleep on her knees. She called a man, had him shave off the locks of his head. She began to torment him. Now, this is really what's interesting to me. That word there means to profane. Don't have any idea in your mind that this was some mixed motive lover. She was like, oh, I love him, but I want the money, but I love him. She was devious. The moment she had what she wanted, she got right in his face. Hey, strong man, they're here now. This was an awful, awful person, Delilah. She began to torment him. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. He awoke from his sleep. Now this is very sad. And he said, I will go out as other times and shake myself free. Sensual wanderers are getting worse and growing weaker. And I have no pleasure in sharing this part with you. Sensual wanderers will be abandoned by God himself. Eventually you come to the place where God's like, you think that's so great? You think that's better than me? You got to have that? Have it. So the answer to this message is not like, hey, you stop it. You stop it right now. Just knock it off. That's not it. The Westminster Confession says that the chief end of man is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. Satisfaction in God is what our hearts were created to experience. And as long as we're stuffing other things into that God-shaped vacuum, our lives are going to be misery. It's not the suppression of desire. It's the directing desire toward that which truly satisfies. As in God, it's a matter of redirect that desire into something that really does satisfy. So here comes the Philistines. And God's man is pretty pathetic now. Sold out to pleasure, shaved head, shattered reputation, strength totally gone. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson, verse 20. And he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as at other times and do you see it in the text? And shake myself free. See, here's the problem with the sensual wanderer. You kind of back into a little bit of sin and be like, you know what? I can always shake myself free. I don't know what it is about me. I just have the capacity to play with sin, and I can kind of dodge in and get into a little bit, but I don't want it anymore. I can shake myself free. But see, the sensual wanderer is getting weaker and getting worse. It's not a plateau. Now, one of these times, I'm telling you it happens. You're going to drop into this thing and you're going to be like, I'm going to get out. And you can't get out anymore. You just can't. And Samson didn't understand one of the saddest verses in the whole Old Testament. Notice, I will go out as at other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Enough? You got to have that? Go. And off he goes. And the Philistines seized him, God's man, and gouged out his eyes, and brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with bronze shackles, and he ground at the mill in the prison. How sad. There was a time in his life when he could dabble and stop and drop and roll and put the fire out. But he pushed it too far and too long. And the sensual person was abandoned by God to the consequences of his own sin. Is there any grace in that? Look at verse 22. But the hair of his head began to grow again. Isn't that awesome? The writer just wants, look up here. The writer just wants you to know God's not done with him. As awful as that is, it's still not too late. In fact, that's the last thing, jot it down. It's not too late for sensual wanderers to come home. It's not too late. Sensual wanderer, listen up. It's not too late. It's not too late. Now, it's not too late if you care, okay? You say, are you trying to scare me? Yes, I am. This is your life. You get one. This is as serious as it gets. When we hear teaching on this, like this again, when we have an opportunity to turn from what you know is gangrene inside you, eating away at the fabric of who you are. It's not too late for sensual wanderers to come home. You know, not seeing, there's probably a lot of grace in that for Samson, because as he's at this mill, you know, using whatever strength remains and grinding out this thing, you know, he would have been looking around for people to lust after, but because he's nothing. So all he could do was think. And instead of being free to roam and graze and satisfy himself, he was locked in a prison, blind and contained. He had some time to think, and his heart began to change. We don't know if it was months or years later, but the Philistines used to bring him out and kind of make a joke out of him, make sport of him. And so they bring Samson up at this party, big party, 2-level party, people down below, 3,000 people on the roof. And they're getting ready to kind of bring him out like a clown and poke fun at him. And he says, he was blind, he couldn't see. And he says, may I just lean here against these pillars? Notice his prayer in verse 28. Then Samson called to the Lord and said, O Lord God, please remember me and please strengthen me only this once, O God, that I may be avenged on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. I'm kind of disappointed by the prayer, honestly. How about that I might take one step up after I took so many steps down? That having profaned your name and forfeited the purpose of my life, that I might, in my death, just one time, God, honor you and do the thing that you made me to do. So, yeah, okay, I'd say about that prayer. But what's really interesting is God, abundant in grace, was not like, not good enough. Sorry, no strength. God was like, not where I want you to be, Samson, but better than where you were. Yes. Supernatural strength, the pillars come down, and the Bible says that Samson, in his death, did more to accomplish his purpose than he did in his whole life. What grace to let him finish. God's not finished with you. Even if today is the last day of your life, God's grace is available to you on the exit ramp. It's not too late. Everyone say it's not too late. It's not too late for the sensual wanderer.